Hello everybody, 'tis I, Michael A. Grimm, aka the Multi-Voice. I have many voices, but one opinion. And as you can see, I got myself a new mic here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long time since I ever did a superhero review, and the one superhero series I'm going to talk about, and that's the reason why I'm wearing a Superman shirt right here, is because I'm going to review Amazon's The Tick. Now, some of you have remembered that I did do the review of The Tick long ago, which is pretty much, I'm going to send a link after this review. And and of course, some of you who do know, I'm just going to briefly talk about it, that they did it. It was based in a comic book by the same name, and they did a cartoon series based on the comic, and then there was the short-lived live-action series starring Patrick Warburton as the Tick. But of course, I'm not going to be doing Patrick Warburton as the Tick. But, you know, after all those years, and you know, one thing I always love remembering saying as a Tick fan, evildoers, beware my battle cry. Spoon! I always wanted to do that. Holding up a spoon to say, spoon! I don't get it. But let's talk about the Amazon series that they did. Now, one thing it did started, now, unlike the Tick cartoon series and the live-action movie, this one has, ever since the popularity of superhero movies and, of course, the MC Universe started and everything, they decided to make a brand new Amazon series of The Tick. And they decided to make it geared towards adults instead of kids. And so there's going to be some violence and some blood involved. So I wouldn't recommend kids who once it gets traumatized seeing somebody getting decapitated or something like that. Or have a knife stabbed right in their head. But of course, underneath it all, the whole story starts with Arthur, played by Griffin Newman. Now, unlike Arthur, how he was in the short-lived live-action series, and also the cartoon, he's always be like, "Not in the face, not in the face." I don't get it. This Arthur is more traumatized because when he was a little kid, he wanted to be a superhero and wants to be a member of the group of superheroes called the Fab Fives. And sadly, all that has crushed when he saw his father gets murdered when the Fab Five Jeep landed right on top of him and squashed his dad. And of course, the Fab Five got out of their ship, and they're all blinded by some sort of syphilis virus that they got all infected. And of course, we have the main villain in all this called the Terror, played by Jackie Earle Holloway. Now, the Terror, he's really evil. He's just pure evil. When he showed up, he told his men to kill the remaining members of the Fab Five, but leave one alive, but destroy his hands. And of course, he walks up to young Arthur while his eye starts twitching because of the trauma he starts having, and just guzzled his ice cream while seeing all of his superheroes getting destroyed. And years later, a lot of people saying that the Terror is dead, and it was all because of their superhero called Superior. Now, Superior, he's supposed to be made to be a parody of Superman. And he did, and of course Superior is played by Brandon Hines. Now, he did declare that the Terror was dead because he blew up his lair and found his set of teeth, so therefore he thinks he is dead. Huh. You destroy somebody and all you found is a set of teeth? Doesn't make any sense. But Arthur, being smart as he is, he has a feeling that the Terror is hiding, and there's a group of bad guys who keep smuggling weapons. And from out of nowhere, out comes the Tick himself, played by Peter Selezievich. Now, Peter Selezievich, he did a spectacular job of playing the Tick. I mean, he was really good. He was really awesome. I was really impressed by his performance. And one thing I know about him, if you ever saw him in the Peter Selezievich show, I mean, he does really good impressions, and he does imitate celebrities, so I think he did an outstanding job as a Tick. And of course, here's one interesting thing. You see, the Tick, he is a superhero. He's indestructible. He's unstoppable. But he doesn't have any guidance. He doesn't know anything about himself, who he was, or where he comes from. But of course, some of you have read the comics that the Tick's origin, he was in an insane asylum in a painted room, wearing that Tick outfit and mask and antenna, and decided to become a superhero. So he got out of the hospital and just went to the city called The City, and therefore met Arthur and made him become his sidekick. But in this one, the Tick who meets this Arthur, he noticed that Arthur himself, he was traumatized by the Terror and has a feeling that he is hiding, planning his next move. So, the Tick decided to help him prove to everyone that the Terror is still alive. And no matter how many times people kept telling him, the Terror is dead. Prove them wrong. Because there's another villain involved who goes by the name of Miss Lint, played by Yara Mendez. Now, she started out as the Terror's henchman, but all of a sudden she starts working with this weapons smuggler who preferred to call himself Ramsey the Fifth. And all he's doing is just smuggling weapons to one country to the next, and that's all he does. But Miss Lynch, she has these electrical bracelets that electricity comes out of her hands. But of course, everywhere she goes, Lint's always been attracted to her. I mean, everywhere she goes, Lint always comes towards her. She always covered with lint and everything. Well, at the same time, Arthur has a sister named Dot, played by Valerie Curry. Now, one thing I gotta say about Valerie Curry, I like her in this show than in the other show I saw her in. I saw her in that one show called Following with Kevin Bacon. I hated that show, and I did not like it, and I did not like the character that she portrayed in that show. I like her better as Dot in this one, because... Now, one thing I gotta say about the character Dot, though, in the cartoon series, Dot was an annoyed sister. Like, she always nags and complains to Arthur. Like, every time they're trying to have dinner, and then trouble starts happening, and they're like, trouble's happening, we need to go. And Dot is like, nope, not until you're done with your dinner and the dishes. And that was kind of annoying. But this, and of course, in the short-lived series, this Dot was... I mean, she was arrogant, because when they saw Arthur in a superhero outfit, they put him in an insane asylum, which turns out that the doctor was insane because he kept wearing all the costumes from his patients. and playing Believe It or Not, I'm Walking on Air. But of course, this Dot, she was a medical medic, but also tries to tell Arthur that he needs to remember that the Terror is dead, and she's afraid that she's going to lose her brother because of his trauma. But it turns out that Arthur was right. And of course, it did stump the theory, though, because some YouTuber made a theory saying that the Tick was part of Arthur's mind, like the Tick is Arthur's alter ego. Well, this show stomped that out because at first Arthur thinks that the Tick was part of his hallucinations, but as he stand right next to Arthur, Dot is like, "Who's he? He's standing right there. I can see him." And Arthur was like, "Oh, you can see him?" And then all of a sudden they come across a very violent character, which turns out that this superhero, this vigilante, he was a member of the Fab Five, but went blind, and also he's wearing mechanical hands. So he's the one who survived, but damaged his hands really bad. So now he has mechanical hands, mechanical eyes, calls himself Overkill, played by Scott Spencer. Now, he's one of those vigilantes. He doesn't, after his experience of surviving from that Cerberus gas, not Cerberus, that syphilis gas, which, that's one thing I have heard, that the syphilis can be treated and can be cured. So, I guess they kind of cured him on it. But he lives in a danger boat voiced by Alan Tudyk. What is it with Alan Tudyk? You see him in a lot of movies and shows, and he appears in so many movies and shows that are based in comic books, and he also appeared in a lot of science fiction shows and movies. He's a pretty damn good actor, and a good voice actor, too. Although, one thing I gotta say is pretty odd, Danger Boat, he's an AI boat who used to fly, but he had a trauma too, because he himself had a captain, he was flying in the air until he didn't pay attention to the sky and crashed into a mountain and accidentally killed his captain. So now he just stays as a boat, but he's also seemed to be attracted to Arthur. Wow. Why do they always have robots and AIs who is attracted to a living person? Are all robots supposed to be asexual? But anyway. Now, Dot used to work as a medic and started healing up some of the patients, including some of the criminals that got wounded by the Tick or Overkill, until she started to have a calling where she decided to help Overkill. And it turns out that Overkill and Lint, they have like a really toxic relationship. That's the reason why the Terror wanted him spared, because Miss Lint has a thing for him. So every time when they both mention each other in front of Arthur, when Arthur mentioned Overkill in front of Miss Lint, he says, "Has he been talking about me?" Or if Overkill says, "Miss Lint, has she been talking about me?" That's just weird. But it turns out that the Terror's plan, he decided to go out in the open, and of course they saved the scientist who made the suit for Arthur, played by, the doctor was named, Dr. Karamazov. And turns out he knows the secrets to Superior. He knows his weakness. So the Terror decided to use the substance that would kill Superior, so they put it on another guy called Very Large Man, or VLM for short. They wanted him to keep walking around, and when the Supreme gets close to him, he will explode and the substance would kill him. But the Tick and Arthur found a way to slow down the giant man and save Superior at the process. And of course, they even talked to one of the members of the Flag Five, who was used to be a mascot, a talking dog called Midnight, voiced by Townsend Coleman, the same guy who does the voice of the Tick. And all of a sudden, the Terror tries to, after his plan has been foiled, now he's going after the Tick and Arthur, but Superior showed up and froze the Terror. So now he's been thrown in prison. And that was the end of Season 2. But on Season 1. But on Season 2, it gets really interesting. Midnight saying that Big Brother is watching you, and it turns out a bunch of drones starts flying about. And of course there is a parody of S.H.I.E.L.D. called Aegis, led by Ty Rathbone, played by Mark Kush. Now, I really like his character, Ty Rathbone, because he is like Nick Fury, except he has this metal device on his chest, which I'm going to talk about that later. And of course, they're going to be dealing against Lobstercules, a giant lobster person, voiced by the ever so lovely and attractive Liv Vesey, the same actress who played Lady Liberty in the short-lived live-action series. And that's another thing. This live-action series never had the same characters from the animated series and the short-lived live-action because they've been owned by other companies. So that's why you're never going to see American-Made or Deflator Mouse or the Sea Urchin because they're owned by Fox Kids from the cartoon series. And of course, you're never going to see the live-action counterpart, Lady Liberty and Batman and probably because of the same reason. But there were some other superheroes in the second season they show, like now they decided to have, Rathbone is developing the new Flag 5, and it turns out that Miss Lint becomes a brand new decided to pretend to be a superhero by calling herself Joan of Arc. And of course, there's also a retired member of the Flag 5 called Flexo. He's the stretchiest man. He can stretch to distance, but he's retired, but he also works as a lawyer. So, I guess that's some good things about, after you're done being a superhero, I guess you continue on being a lawyer and defend somebody or do some lawsuits and such. And of course, there's even a magician who has a third nipple on the middle of his chest, which is the cost of his power, so he always does his magical thing with a third nipple. And then there is Bronze Star, who looks like he's just covered with brawn paint and brawn clothing. And they even discovered that Lobstercules is a mom, so what they did, they saved her children, and they're trying to take good care of them until Aegis figures out that she can be released. She was just being forced by a bunch of bad guys. So they're planning to release Lobstercules so she can go back to her kids. And while at the same time, turns out that their scientist is really crooked. You see, he hates super-powered people. So he's trying to make an example that superpowered people cannot be trusted, and us humans should be definitive, should be superior than the superpowered people. Do we have people like that in other media? Hydra's been like that on the MCU. And also that movie, Mr. Glass, or that movie Glass, where the plot twist, spoilers for those who have never seen the movie Glass, turns out that there was a top secret society who wants to get rid of people with superpowers because they're superior to us normal people who can't not have superpowers. And of course, one thing is really shocking, Dot decided to help Overkill, and she has superpowers too. She can see the future before it starts to happen. And of course, another thing that's kind of surprising, turns out that Arthur has a stepfather named Walter, and it turns out that he was part of Aegis. He was one of the top secret agents who's supposed to keep an eye on Arthur's parents, and even including June, Arthur's mother. But I guess he fell in love with her, so therefore he married her. While he was supposed to be protecting them, keeping an eye on them to make sure that none of the Terror or any other bad villains trying to go after Arthur's parents. But, as usual, they finally stopped the mad scientist, and everything. I mean, there's even a homeless guy who has a tinfoil on his head. He has superpowers too. When he removes a tinfoil, when he grabs people, he'll make them disappear. But of course, it's kind of awkward the way he says things. I mean, when he removes his tinfoil head, he's like, "I have to touch you," and then he'll just grab your arm and disappear, go invisible. So he has the ability to make himself go invisible, and when he grabs other people, he can make them invisible. Pretty handy, if you ask me. And they pretty much tied up Season 2 in a nice little package. And they left Season 2, since the Fab Five is no longer around. Oh yeah, and here's another thing. The scientists controlled Overkill to shoot Rathbone right in the head and declared him dead. But while laying in the morgue, that chest plate that I mentioned that he has on his chest, it opened and a bunch of tentacles came out. So, is that chest plate a black hole doorway to a Lovecraftian world, and that's what's keeping him alive, and always keeps feeding it mice? And that's another thing. And of course, in the episode, Joan of Arc, aka Miss Lint, she got all the information from Aegis and have a computer nerd called Edgelord go into their base and take all their weapons and vehicles so they can make profits out of them by selling them to the highest bidder. So that pretty much left too many questions of what's going to happen. Like, what's going to happen if they realize about Rathbone and that chess piece, and what's going to happen with Joan of Arc, aka Miss Lint. And of course, one thing is pretty interesting. Supreme, after they realized that the Terror was alive, now everybody starts criticizing him because, I mean, he said he swore that he thought the Terror was dead, but he wasn't. And now he cannot take criticism anymore. Now he's being disliked and criticized by other people, and there's even a podcast YouTuber who keeps talking down on Aegis and Supreme and everything. And sadly, Supreme just couldn't handle the criticism, so he keeps doing stuff like carving a statue in this giant hill in a Hispanic country, and he just carved a statue of him carrying a wounded person, which that doesn't help. And he also kidnapped the YouTuber who criticized him and just traumatized him and scared the crap out of him. So now throughout the whole show, he stays at the moon pasting. And of course, at the end, he thought he can do better by circling around the Earth, do a little time travel, the reference to the first Superman movie. Circle around the Earth so he can time travel and fix the damage that he did in the past. Until another ship found him, and it turns out he's an alien fugitive for some reason. While as for Tick and Arthur, they just run outside through the door, and of course he yelled out, "Spoon!" for the first time. And after Season 2 was over, I was waiting to see a Season 3. There was no Season 3. They just ended with a cliffhanger on Season 2. Didn't finish the whole freaking thing. And you want to know why they didn't finish with Season 3? It's because the other shows on Amazon that are still going on even to this day. Amazon's The Boys and Amazon's Invincible. They're a lot edgier and a lot darker, so that's how they decided to end the Tick with Season 2 and never bother to do Season 3. Come on, man! God damn it! If you want to do a good show, end it with Season 3. I mean, seriously, bring back some of the cast and do Season 3 for God's sakes. Well, that is my review of Amazon's The Tick for the day. So, for those of you who likes my review of Amazon Prime's version of The Tick, please leave a comment down below, hit like and subscribe for more. And, well, one thing I'm going to end it with. Spoon!